Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's collaboration webinar by Postman. My name is Matt Wall. I'm a senior engineer here at Postman, and I'll be guiding you through some of the key areas and things to know about in Postman when it comes to collaboration. So we believe that Postman is at its best when you're using it as a collaborative effort. A lot of you might be familiar with using Postman just on your own, but actually, there's a huge amount of resources and benefit to using Postman in a collaborative format. And there's a lot of tools baked in to help you do this in a really streamlined and easy way. And those are the things that we're going to cover in today's webinar. So those things are workspaces, version control, roles and permissions, and team profiles. I'm going to walk through each of these sections, let you know a little bit about why they're important, and then we'll jump into the app and do a walkthrough of how to use those features. So before we get on to those four areas, something to cover here is that Postman collections are at the heart of all the collaboration that you can do. And this is the key entity for most things in Postman outside of just collaboration. And so if you don't already have a collection, now's the time to fire up Postman and start putting one of these together and stop just working from your history. As a recap, a collection is a way of grouping together all your requests or a group of similar requests into one bucket. And so having a good collection built out will be required for what we look at today. And it's worth considering as you're building out your collections, how do you do this in the best way possible, with the best practice to ensure that not only is this collection useful to you, but as you collaborate and work with others and you have outside consumers, how can they easily start working with your collection without any roadblocks? So of the four topics that we're going to look at today, Workspaces is the first one. Before we even think about collaboration, Workspaces in Postman offer us a really easy way to stay organized. So if we see as a collection as a way of grouping together similar requests, Workspace is a way of grouping together similar collections. Instead of keeping them all in one place and having a hard time organizing, Workspaces help keep our collections in sensible groups. Workspaces are also the tool that we're going to use in order to share our collections around our Postman team, as well as our environments. And then we're going to look at a Postman enterprise feature called private workspaces. And these are still team workspaces, but they're ones that you can lock down on an invite-only basis. So if you've got a project which doesn't involve everyone in your team and just a few specific people, you can create a private workspace and collaborate from there. And then we'll also take a look at how Postman's in-app commenting and notifications work. And that means you can keep all of your communication inside Postman without having to go off to any other platform. Once we've covered workspaces, we'll get into roles and permissions. Whenever we're working collaboratively on something, we want to make sure that we do that securely and that not just anyone can go in and make changes to the content that we have within Postman. Using roles and permissions also means that we're defining very clear responsibilities about who can do what with our collections in Postman. And it also gives us the ability to, create some gold standard content versus having other content in Postman, which is iterative or something that we're working on over time. What plays really nicely with the roles and permissions in Postman is version control. And we'll see a little bit about how certain version control actions change depending on what permission level we have on a collection. But also you get all the typical benefits of version control. So you're probably currently version controlling your code. So why would you not also do this with your collection? It allows you to maintain a source of truth. And it helps you put together a structured process so that anytime you receive a contribution to a collection, it's happening in a managed way. On top of the version control, we have a changelog that allows you to see the change over time of your collection. So we'll look at that. And there's also versioning baked into that changelog as well. Once we've wrapped up with workspaces, roles and permissions, and version control, we'll move on to team profiles. Once you've put together your collections, you've shared them around your team, actually there's a huge network of other Postman users who it may be beneficial for them to receive the collections that your team has spent, a hard time and put a lot of effort into building out. So this team profile allows you to publish your existing collections that you've put together. And so as well as your own internal team seeing the benefits of having that actionable version of the API that you can run with straight away, you can provide that to outside consumers as well. And doing such a thing means that rather than using static documentation, folks can get a hold of your Postman collections instead and run with the API really quickly. And we're seeing this as a bit of a trend of a way to reduce the time to hello world. So how quickly can someone come across your API and then actually start consuming it and getting a response back from your API without having to read static documentation, write code around it, or build out their own collection around your API. So now I've outlined the agenda, I'm going to switch over to the Postman app and we're actually going to go through it. So now would be a great time to fire up Postman if you have it installed on your machine, if you'd like to follow along. So I'm going to switch over now. So we've got the Postman app open here. And as I mentioned, Workspaces is going to be the first thing that we go through. So Workspaces in Postman are accessible through the top center drop-down in the app. So if you click here, that will launch the Workspaces dialog. And we can see that there's two categories of workspace. So we have team and personal workspaces. Now, team workspaces are clearly going to be that way that we can collaborate. But if you're currently using the free version of Postman, you might just be looking at personal workspaces for now. And as I mentioned, as we were going through that agenda, as a key concept, workspaces are a way to stay organized. So I'm currently sat within a workspace called production. If I go into that workspace dropdown, I click on the personal tab and I click on my personal workspace. Postman switches over into a new workspace and we can see that the list of collections available to me changes on the left-hand side. So this is how we can divide up our collections and stay organized. Now, when we start thinking about using team workspaces, these are workspaces which are available to everyone within your Postman team. So rather than just working in isolation within your own personal workspaces, which only you can see, if you create a Postman team, the workspaces that you see in this list are ones that anyone else in your team can also see and they can also navigate to. So if I move into one of these team workspaces here, the list of collections that I'm looking at on the left-hand side is matched for everyone in my team. Everyone has access to these collections. And so straight away, you can see the benefit here. If you've ever been through and tried to share a collection in Postman, maybe you've gone through an export and import flow. When you start doing something like that, sending collections over email, very quickly you lose a source of truth, especially if you're trying to share your collections around a larger team. You could be unsure who has the latest version of the collection. Did someone make these changes to the collection? You have to ask around, try and get a hold of, a copy of the latest version of the collection. And doing this is really unnecessary when Postman can support this collaboration in the first place. So if you create a team workspace, automatically everyone has access to the same content, both with regards to your collections, but also with regards to your environments as well. So both your environments and your collections sit at the same level. So anytime you change workspace, you'll have access to a different set of collections and a different set of environments. Now, how do these collections get into a team workspace in the first place? So you can create these collections within the workspace just like you would within your own. So if you go into the new collection option here and build out a collection, that's one way to do it. But also if you're just getting started with the team version of Postman, you probably already have a bunch of collections that you want to make available to the broader team. And so I'm going to show you how you can share collections around between workspaces. If I move back to my personal workspace here, you can see that I've got a collection around the Postman API. And so, maybe I've built this out and now I'm looking to share it with the broader team. If I come into the collection menu here, which is indicated by these 3 dots, and when I hover over it, it says view more actions. If I then click on the share collection, it's the first option in that menu. This loads up a dialog which allows me to select exactly which workspace I'd like to move that collection to. So if I want to share that into the production workspace that I was already working with, I can simply click on that and press share. And that will move me over to a page which allows me to manage the exact roles on that collection. We're going to jump into roles and permissions in just a few minutes, so I'm not going to touch this just now. So if I close this dialog box, and then I navigate back to that team workspace, which is production, what we should see is that Postman API is now appearing within this workspace, and it's going to be accessible to anyone else within my team who can join this workspace. So now, at minimum, everyone in my team is going to have access to be able to come in here, open up and execute a specific request. They can also modify those requests, but they may not be able to save the changes down unless they're an editor. And we'll get into those roles and permissions in just a second. So you can see how being able to share your collections means that now suddenly you can work together to maintain and add new features to your collections. And the friction in accessing your collections is greatly reduced because you're just going through that workspaces dropdown. Now, I mentioned that for Postman Enterprise users, there is an additional feature of private workspaces. If I go back into the dropdown here, you'll see that actually I've already created one of these. And this particular workspace secret project is only showing up for me because it's something that I created and I was invited to. For the rest of my Postman team, this isn't a workspace which will be showing up in the workspace list. And the way this is managed, whenever you create a workspace in the first place, or if you have an existing workspace that you'd like to make private, within the settings, which you can get to through the 3 dots again, and then edit workspace, you'll see that there's a checkbox down here which says make workspace private. And so this is where I can start to select exactly who I would like to have access to that workspace. So if I pick out someone to add, then it would mean that just myself and my colleague have access to this workspace and no one else can see it or have any knowledge of that. So if we need to collaborate on a project together, but without involvement of the outside team, this is the best way to go about it. Now, when we shared that collection into the team workspace, the dialogue that I got immediately after sharing was regarding roles and permissions. And these are a really key concept to understand whenever we're talking about sharing in Postman and collaborating. We want to make sure that any change that happens to our collections over time is deliberate and isn't something that is done by accident or someone who shouldn't have edit access to our collection. So if we continue to work with this Postman API collection here, if I go into the collection menu again, you'll see that immediately below the share option that we used last time is a manage roles option. So if I click on that, that's going to load up the overall roles and permissions that have been configured for this collection. And you can see that there's a default permission level on this collection at the moment where everyone in my team is set as a viewer and just I am an editor. And in general, this is a pretty best practice way of setting up your collections. If you set everyone in your team to be an editor, that might work if you're a small team. It's quite easy to track change and manage things. But if you've got a lot of people in your team, you really want to consider, I should probably lock this down and then pick out a few specific people to add as editors. So obviously I'm an editor as I originally created this collection, but I could go in and pick out a few other people who I'm also happy to edit the collection. And in doing so, I'm quite clearly delegating roles, and this makes it obvious who is responsible for what. So if you are an editor on a collection, you know that you're responsible for keeping that updated with the latest changes and also reviewing any changes from other people as they propose them over time. So if I save this down, one of the benefits of kind of going through this flow and also setting people as, setting your entire team as view only means that you can differentiate from content where potentially everyone can edit and access it if you've got something in progress or in the works versus kind of gold standard and reference collections where the API is complete and you've built out this collection and there's no real reason to change it over time. It's just simply something people can use as reference. So you may be asking, if I set everyone in my team as a viewer of the collection, how can they go about actually making any changes to that collection? I don't want to go into every collection into the manage roles dialog and update exactly who should be able to do what as someone comes along and says, hey, I've got this change that I want to make this to this collection. Can you add me as an editor? You may have to come back after that and tweak things to say, oh, yeah, add this person as an editor and then remove them once they've made the change. And that's quite a lot to go through. So this brings us nicely into Postman's version control feature, as this plays really, really nicely with roles and permissions. So you might have noticed when I had that collection menu open that there's an option in here to create a fork. And this is the root of how version control works in Postman. And you can create a fork whether you're just a viewer of a collection or whether you're an editor. So this allows you that sidetrack to propose changes even if you aren't an editor on the collection. When you click on create a fork, this dialog box comes up, which asks for two things. So number one is a fork label. Typically here, you'll be describing maybe the bug you're fixing or the feature you're adding, some way of clearly identifying what your change to the collection will be. I'm just going to enter webinar here. And then there's a drop down which allows you to select where you'd like to develop that fork. So all the workspaces that you're a part of will be listed here, both your personal and your team workspaces. And so it's worth considering exactly where you want to develop this fork. If you want to do it in isolation, then you could move the fork into one of your personal workspaces. The team workspaces are indicated by this icon of two people here. And there's a number of different things you can do to really start to build out this flow. So, we see people building workspaces specific to just forking and creating all their forks there. And it allows one clean, clear place for people to go and see which collections are being built out or might still be in progress. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to stick to the workspace that I'm already within. So I'm going to select production because that's what I've got up here and click on fork. And once the fork is created, we'll see that I have a duplicate copy of the collection that I had previously, but this time there's a label on it indicating that it's a fork and it's got that name that I entered in the dialog box. And again, this is something that I can do even if I'm just a viewer of that original or master collection, however you want to call it. And so within the fork, this is where I can go in and start making changes, and I can save those changes down again, even if I'm just a viewer of the original collection. So I can go in and start tweaking things. This could be as simple as, changing an endpoint, taking a look at a test, playing around with some things, whatever it is. I can go in, make my changes, and once I'm happy with those changes, I can review them in Postman's web dashboard. So to get at that view, again, we're going to come back into the collection menu here. And right below create a fork, you'll now see that merge changes lights up. And this will only show up when we work fork. obviously you can't merge any changes from a master collection that's not forked. So if I click that, it jumps over to Postman's web dashboard, as I mentioned. And this dashboard is going to give us an overview of exactly what's changed over time. So we can see what's been added, what's been removed, and this gives us a good overview to make sure that if I propose these changes, exactly what I'm expecting goes ahead and gets merged into that master branch. Because I'm an editor of the original collection, I have the possibility to merge these changes in here. But if I was just viewing, I'd only be able to use this dashboard as a way to see exactly what was happening in my fork and what had changed over time. Now, one of the things that might happen if you've got a larger team is that since you created your fork, perhaps the master collection has changed. Maybe someone else has merged in a fork for you, or maybe an editor of that collection has gone ahead and made some changes to the collection directly, which isn't best practice, but these things can happen. And as a result of that, you would expect to see some kind of conflict. Postman's version control has conflict control built right into it. So if we just take a look at what might happen if we did something like that, I'll open up the original collection here, and we'll go ahead and tweak it slightly. Now that I've saved changes down in that original collection, if I go back to my merge overview here and refresh the page, we'll see that we've got some extra warnings and things appearing now in this merge overview. So we get a message that's saying the original collection has been modified since you last updated the fork. We would recommend pulling changes before continuing. So we could go ahead and just pull those changes straight in, but we can also take a look at all the differences change by change, and we can decide whether we want to use the changes we made or the changes which have since been merged into the original collection. And you can see that even though I am an editor, I can't merge these changes in. There's no way to force these through. So I need to resolve these conflicts before I can continue. So even if you're a viewer, it's definitely worth loading up this page to make sure that you don't have any conflicts. So you go through and have everything resolved so that you have the collection to a point where you're happy for an editor to come along and have the chance to merge it in. Now, the kind of the final part of this is if you've got your collection, if you've got your fork ready to go, how can you notify an editor that you would like to propose these changes and get them merged in? You might be tempted to go off to the tool that you normally use to send a direct message to let someone know that, hey, can you take a look at this? And perhaps your conversation might go something like, hey, I've created a fork of the Postman API collection called webinar within the production workspace. Could you take a look at it? And that's definitely one way that you could go. But also built right into Postman is a commenting system. So if I open up a request within that collection that I've forked, you'll see that there's a comments option up here. And within here, I can tag anyone else on my team, and I can leave a message for them. And when I add this comment, you can see that this gets turned into a link, and that's going to send a notification through to that user so that they have the option to come and digest this fork. They can step through it themselves. They can actually execute the request, see how they behave if that's something you've changed. If you've changed your test scripts, they can validate the functionality of those as well. And that gives you a means of doing everything in terms of communication and collaboration directly within Postman. And for that user that you notify, it'll show up on their little notification bell. So if you click on that, you'll see a comment like, whoever mentioned you in the particular collection, and that allows you a quick way to jump through to exactly where that comment was left, meaning the editor can very quickly get working with your collection. So finally, when we're thinking about version control, it might be that despite all this process of using roles and permissions, merging something in, we end up having a bad merge, something that we didn't want to go into the collection. And in order to recover that or see what's happened, we need to click on this little flyout for our collection. And this is going to allow us to get at Postman's changelog. And so once you've clicked on that, there's 4 tabs along the top here, and it's the changelog that we're going to be interested in. And here you're going to get a edit by edit timeline of exactly what's happened to a collection over time. So you can see who carried out a particular action, when they did it, and exactly what they changed. And anything below the current version, you can always go back and restore to that point in time. So anytime you're making changes to a collection in Postman, you always have that capability to roll back. And this changelog will go all the way back to the point of the collection's creation. So you're never going to miss out on something. You're never going to lose any changes over time. So if we've been through the full flow of creating our workspaces, sharing the appropriate collections and environments into those workspaces, we've carefully considered the roles and permissions that we want to set up, and we've been using Postman's version control in order to maintain and produce those collections over time. The next thing that we might want to think about is, well, how can we provide these collections to outside consumers? We find these collections really useful internally in order to be able to action and test the API and a whole bunch of other things. So rather than provide outside consumers just static documentation, which is also something Postman can produce, it'd be great if we could provide them with the Postman collection as well. And that gives them a way to dive straight into your API and get working with it. So in order to publish a Postman collection to the broader Postman community, again, this is something that we're going to get at through the menu of the collection that we want to publish. And this time the option that we're looking for is towards the bottom, called Publish Docs. If I click on that, again, that will move us out to Postman's web dashboard. And this will give us a little bit of a form to fill out to configure exactly what our online static documentation will look like. But this is also where we're going to be able to publish our collection out to Postman's approved network of collections. And we'll see a little bit more of that in just a second. So going through this wizard can allow you to publish a static doc site. So much like Postman's own documentation, which you can find at api.getpostman.com, going through this wizard will allow you to publish something like that. So you can configure your domain, you can configure the look and feel of things. But key to making this Postman collection discoverable without going off to the web and finding static documentation is a little checkbox down here under collection discovery. And if I click on this, this is going to allow me to publish my collections as the Postman team that I'm working as. And so you'll see here it says add to API network. And Postman's API network is basically a marketplace of curated, approved collections, which can allow you to get working with APIs really quickly. So if you check on this box and you go through and fill out everything on this form, so you'll need to select a category that applies to the collection that you're publishing. You need to provide a summary. And once you've done all of these things, you'll see that there's a publish collection option down here. And you'll see that right here it's saying publish as, and this is providing the details of the profile that I'm going to publish the collection under. So when I hit publish, this is going to submit that collection to Postman's API network. And what exactly does that mean? Okay, so for this, I'm going to move back into the Postman application. And something that you may have used to create your collections and new content within Postman is this new button in the top left. And typically when you click on that, you'll be within this create new tab. It's where you can open a new tab for a request, create a collection, all of that good stuff. But there's also two other tabs up here, and the tab that I'm interested in right now is the API Network tab that we were just talking about. And so the API Network allows you to get hold of collections that these teams have published by creating Postman documentation, but it allows you to get hold of them directly within the app. You don't have to go anywhere else. You can get at them directly inside Postman. So for example, if we look at Okta here we're viewing Okta's profile and all of the collections that they've been through that publishing flow and submitted to the network. So now, rather than having to go off to Okta's website, find their documentation, find the relevant page, the relevant requests I want to work with, if, for example, I'm interested in working with authentication with Okta, I can find that collection, I can hit the Run in Postman button, and that will directly import that collection into Postman for me. So I now immediately have that actionable version of the collection ready to go. So again, this comes back to that time to reducing how long it takes someone to get going with your API, that time to hello world. If they can get hold of the collection, that time is going to be very small. So that team profile that we were looking at within the API network here, that's something that you can set up and configure exactly as you'd like for your team. So if you hit on the team button in the top right here, and then you go down to team settings, this again will take you into Postman's web dashboard. And on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a public profile option just here. So this allows you to set the name of the team and description that you'd like to add. And you can also create a public URL for your profile. So this means that people can access the collections you've submitted to the API network on the web as well as just within the Postman app. So if I click on this, for example, this is going to navigate me over to the profile for my team on the network, and I can see that collection that has been published to the network. And this is mirrored exactly by the same API network experience that we see in-app. And in general, this means that you can provide this link to folks to come and consume all of the collections that your team has created. And you'll be a part of that broader API network, which is also accessible through the web if you would prefer to browse it there rather than in the app. And so once you've been through this process, you open things up to something like 8 million Postman users and counting. So this is really worthwhile, something considering if you have gone to the effort of building out some collections which could work for outside consumers. And hopefully the tips and tricks and things I've walked you through today with regards to workspaces, roles and permissions, and version control will be really useful in doing that. So I'm going to go back into my slides for just a second here. And what I'd love to do now is take any questions that have come up as a result of the walkthrough that I've given today. I know that the team here at Postman has been very busy answering these as the webinar's gone on, but I'll take a couple live now. So I'm just opening up the Q&A section, and I can take a look at the questions we have here. So we got one here from Ryan. Is there a way to disallow direct changes to the main branch and force a fork, even for editors? So that's a great question, Ryan. Currently, as things stand, editors will always be able to edit the collection directly. Over time, I might expect that to change in Postman. We're looking very carefully at how we can make sure roles and permissions are a part of the broader Postman lifecycle, and so that you have really discrete control over each individual part of the collection. But as of right now, editors can still change that master version. Okay, so a question here from Eric. If my teammate created a fork in their own personal workspace and they want to merge to a shared workspace later, am I able to see their changes before they merge somehow? So if someone's created a fork in their own personal workspace, that's not something that you can view unless they go through that shared dialogue and make it accessible through a team workspace. So probably the best thing there is if they do want to develop it in isolation, they go ahead, they create the fork in their personal workspace. And then when it's complete, they can just share the fork back to a team workspace and make it visible to you in that way. Okay, so Victor, in a workspace, is it possible to make certain environments variables private and hide it for some users? Or is it a better practice to create a different private workspace with the protected environment variables? Yep, great question. So for that, I would probably recommend going through using private workspaces. That's the best way if you really want to lock down content in that way. Currently, environments will be accessible to everyone who has access to the workspace at the moment. Okay, so I've got a question here from Ramandeep. What if I don't want to share publicly my collection? I just want to share it privately using all that documentation and customization features. Is that possible? So yes, when you create a collection in a team workspace, automatically we create private documentation for you. So if you jump into the Postman web dashboard, you'll be able to see a static view of the documentation, just like the public documentation looks, but it's locked down to just your team. So you need to authenticate into Postman and get access to the dashboard before you can see that. Okay, so we've got a question from Ryan here. How do you deal with multiple environments? If I have multiple APIs hosted in different environments, is there a good way to organize the environments? Org's list is getting rather long. Yeah, great question. So this is probably going to come down to exactly how you divide things up into workspaces. So there's a number of different strategies that you can think about when creating your workspaces in the first place. Some people do this service-based, so you have a workspace for each API. And so when you have multiple collections built out around those APIs, you can find them in one place. Some people prefer to create their workspaces around the teams that they're working in. So I'd probably encourage you to just think about exactly how you organize your workspaces in order to split your collections and environments up into more manageable chunks. Okay, question from Roy. Is it possible to have an internal API network visible only to members of the enterprise? So unfortunately not, Roy, but the great thing here is that you effectively have that by using the team version of Postman. So rather than going into that new tab and hitting API network, instead you just navigate through your team workspaces. And if your workspaces are named well and make sense to the broader team, then they're going to quickly be able to find the collections that they need to work with. So we're just going to take two more questions here. So let's see. I got a question here from M. Jackson. What is the difference between adding a member and invite someone to workspace? So when you're adding a member, that's around adding someone to your Postman team. So the entire number of people who have access to all of the workspaces within your team, rather inviting someone to workspace is just specific to if you want to have someone drop into a particular workspace and you invite them, they'll already need to be part of that broader team. Okay, so I'm going to take one final question here. So I've got a question, what is the difference between environments and workspaces? That's a great question. So workspaces are a top level way of staying organized in Postman. A workspace contains both environments and collections. So this is just a way of grouping things together into a relevant place. Whereas an environment in Postman is a set of variables that you would like to define that you can quickly change between. So if you create multiple environments within a workspace, that can mean that you can jump between really quickly, for example, local, staging, and production credentials without having to reconfigure your requests. Instead, you can just define those variables in an environment and quickly switch between them. So that's about all we have time for today. I'd like to thank you all for joining the webinar. We will be circulating an FAQ and also a recording of the webinar after the session. That will be available in about 2 days. Any other questions that you have, I would encourage you to go to the Postman community at community.getpostman.com. Our learning center, which contains all Postman documentation, that's at learning.getpostman.com. And also there's some resources directly within the app. So if you look at the bottom right of the Postman application, you'll see that there's a bootcamp that allows you to do in-app learning. There's also a question mark in the very bottom right-hand corner. If you click on that, that gives you links out to all of the things I've just mentioned with regards to our community, our documentation, and also a link out to our support pages. And that can allow you to submit a ticket to our support team if you're really stuck. That's all for today. Thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you soon in a future webinar. Thank you.